This idea sounds simple, but it changes everything. We spend our entire lives chasing results, success, money, happiness. We believe that once we reach the goal, life will finally feel calm. But what if the real problem is not what we want, but how we are trying to get there? Every day we rush, we compare, we pressure ourselves to arrive faster, and in that hurry we lose something important: peace. The practicing mind doesn't promise instant success. It doesn't offer shortcuts or hacks. Instead, it reveals a deeper truth: that progress can be calm, that effort doesn't have to feel heavy, and that fulfillment doesn't live at the finish line. It lives in the practice. If you've ever felt frustrated while working toward a goal, overwhelmed by the journey, or exhausted before you even arrive, this idea might quietly change the way you live, work, and grow. The core idea of the practicing mind is simple, but it goes against almost everything we are taught about success and achievement. Most of us spend our lives chasing results. We want promotions, money, recognition, fitness goals, or mastery in a skill. We imagine that the moment we reach the finish line, we will finally feel calm, satisfied, and successful. But the truth is, that mindset is exactly what keeps us frustrated, stressed, and impatient. Think about it. How often have you started something new and found yourself counting the days until it works? Learning a new instrument, starting a business, trying to get in shape. At first, everything feels heavy. Progress is slow. Your fingers fumble, your ideas stumble, your energy dips, and your mind screams, "This should be faster. This should be easier." That voice is not reality. It's impatience disguised as truth. It's the expectation that life should move at your desired speed, and it's the very thing that stops you from enjoying the journey and actually improving. Thomas Sterner calls this impatience the result trap. We tie our happiness to outcomes that are often outside our control. We say, "I'll be happy when I finish this project," or "I'll feel confident once I hit my goal weight." But what if the problem is not the goal itself? What if the problem is how we approach the process? The book teaches that true growth, mastery, and peace come from focusing not on the goal, but on the act of practicing itself. Imagine two people learning the piano. One is naturally talented, plays fast, and imagines themselves performing perfectly at their first recital. The other struggles, makes mistakes, and doesn't worry about the outcome. They just sit and practice every day, paying attention to each note, each finger placement, each rhythm. Who do you think will actually improve more in the long run? The second person. Not because they are more talented, but because they respect the process and let mastery grow naturally. The first person may burn out, give up, or always feel anxious that they are behind because their mind is attached to results rather than effort. This is where most of us fail in life. We measure every day by what we accomplish toward a goal rather than what we practice and learn in the process. We forget that the journey is the reality, and the goal is just a marker in the distance. Sterner's philosophy is radical yet liberating. The moment you stop demanding results from today, today becomes bearable, even joyful. Progress starts happening effortlessly when your mind stops resisting the present moment. Let's make it real. Think about your own life. Maybe you've joined a gym and within 2 weeks you are frustrated because the scale hasn't moved. Or you started writing a book or learning a language, but you feel like nothing is happening fast enough. The truth is, your impatience is the real obstacle. The work itself is neutral. Practice itself is neutral. Your mind's demand for instant results is what makes it painful. Sterner teaches that the practicing mind approaches effort differently. It focuses on presence, not performance. It allows mistakes. It doesn't compare today to yesterday or expect perfection. And ironically, when you practice this way, results often come faster and more consistently than when you force them. The secret isn't working harder or longer, it's working calmly, deliberately, and with attention to each step. And here's the most powerful part. This principle doesn't just apply to learning skills, it applies to life itself. Every task, every challenge, every goal can be approached with a practicing mind. Washing dishes, writing an email, preparing a report, training for a marathon. Any effort can become an opportunity to grow and find peace if you let go of attachment to the outcome. The core message is clear. Don't chase results. Don't let your mind live in the future. Stop rushing, stop judging, and start practicing. Focus on what you can do now. Respect the process, and the rest will follow. When you embrace this philosophy, life stops being a constant struggle, and every step, no matter how small, becomes meaningful. Because real mastery, real growth, and real peace are not found at the finish line. They are found in the practice itself, one moment at a time, one effort at a time, fully present. That is the essence of the practicing mind. Stress is something we all feel, yet most of us misunderstand where it comes from. We think it comes from the work itself, the deadlines, the projects, the tasks we have to complete. But the truth is far simpler and far more revealing. Stress is created by the mind, not the work. The human mind is impatient by design. It wants instant results. It wants certainty. It wants proof that everything we do is working. When things don't move as quickly as we hope, the mind panics. It begins to overthink, to compare, to question every action. Why am I not there yet? Am I wasting my time? Is this even worth it? These are not rational questions. They are the echo of an anxious mind trying to control the uncontrollable. Think about it in everyday life. Imagine you're studying for an important exam. You sit down with your books, but your mind is already on the final score. You imagine failing. You imagine disappointing yourself or others. You check the clock constantly, counting the hours until the test is over. That tension is not caused by reading or writing or practicing. It is caused by the mind refusing to live in the present moment. It's the impatience, the need for immediate results, that makes a simple study session feel like torture. Or consider the workplace. You are assigned a project and given a deadline. You know the steps to complete it, but your mind is obsessed with the outcome, the praise, the recognition, the bonus. Each small step feels heavy. Each action feels like a race against an invisible clock. And before long, what could have been a manageable task becomes a source of anxiety. That is the trap most people fall into. They believe stress comes from too much to do, but it actually comes from demanding that the work produces results faster than life naturally allows. The practicing mind explains that this is a universal pattern. Stress comes from attaching expectation to time. We set arbitrary deadlines in our heads, not because the task demands it, but because we are impatient. We imagine that if we don't see progress immediately, we are failing. And in doing so, we rob ourselves of the very satisfaction and learning that the task can provide. Here's a powerful example. Many people start a fitness journey full of hope. The first week, they are disciplined. The second week, nothing changes. The scale hasn't moved. The abs haven't appeared. Frustration creeps in. Motivation fades, and the cycle repeats. The real obstacle isn't the exercise or the diet. It's the mind rushing ahead, refusing to accept the gradual pace of real change. If the focus shifted from results to the act of showing up, every workout would feel meaningful, every meal an opportunity to practice discipline, and stress would dissolve. The book teaches a simple yet radical idea. Effort itself is neutral. Practice itself is neutral. Learning itself is neutral. Stress is the story we tell ourselves about the work. The moment we stop expecting the moment to produce a finished product, we free ourselves. We can focus on the present, on the next step in front of us. without the weight of imagined failure or delayed success. Imagine approaching life this way: one paragraph written, one workout completed, one conversation had with full attention, no rush, no self-criticism, no future anxiety, just presence. That is what the practicing mind embodies. That is the antidote to stress. And here's the paradox. When the mind stops forcing results, when the mind stops running ahead, progress accelerates, focus deepens, creativity emerges, learning becomes more efficient, stress fades, life becomes calmer. And yet the work is exactly the same. The only difference is how the mind shows up. The practicing mind shows us that real mastery, real growth, and real satisfaction do not come from speed, force, or control. They come from patience, attention, and acceptance. Stress is not a measure of how much we are doing. It is a measure of how attached we are to the outcome. Free the mind from that attachment, and suddenly, effort feels lighter, results come naturally, and the journey itself becomes rewarding. Practice is not something we do only when learning a skill. It is a way of life. And yet, most of us live as if practice is a punishment or a stepping stone to some distant reward. We rush through our days, our minds already in the next task, the next goal, the next success. We are eating, but thinking about work. We are working, but worrying about the future. We are resting, but feeling guilty for not doing more. Our body is in one place, but our mind is somewhere else entirely. The practicing mind teaches us a simple yet revolutionary idea. Be where you are. Do what you are doing. Pay attention to the moment in front of you. Treat every task, no matter how small, as an opportunity to practice presence. This is harder than it sounds because the mind resists. It wants excitement, it wants results, it wants to move ahead. But true mastery, true calm, comes from learning to practice within the moment, without rushing or forcing the outcome. Think about something as ordinary as washing dishes. Most people see this as a chore, a step between meals and freedom. The mind is somewhere else, scrolling on the phone, worrying about tomorrow, or replaying yesterday. But what if washing dishes was practice? What if every plate, every movement, every soapy bubble was an opportunity to train attention, patience, and focus? It sounds small, almost ridiculous. But these small moments of mindful practice shape the mind far more than sporadic bursts of high-energy effort. The same principle applies to learning a skill, writing a book, or training for a marathon. The practicing mind shows up consistently without judging whether the moment is perfect, whether the work is producing immediate results. Imperfection is not failure, it is the medium through which mastery grows, and consistency beats bursts of talent every time. A person who shows up calmly every day will eventually outperform the one who waits for inspiration or motivation to strike. Most of us fail to see this in our own lives. We look at someone who has achieved something great and assume they had a secret shortcut or natural talent. We ignore the hours, the consistent practice, the tiny daily repetitions that nobody notices. We don't realize that mastery, in any field, is built from countless ordinary actions taken with full attention. The journey itself, when approached as practice, contains all the growth we are seeking. Here's a simple truth. When you stop judging each moment by its results and start treating each moment as practice, life becomes lighter. Motivation is no longer necessary because you are not dependent on outcomes to feel good about your effort. Frustration fades because the mind is no longer racing toward tomorrow, and focus becomes effortless because the present is enough. The practicing mind also teaches patience. Real progress is not immediate. You may not notice changes day by day. You may make mistakes repeatedly. You may feel slow. And that is exactly how it should be. A mind that demands instant success will never appreciate the richness of the process. But a mind that practices calmly, patiently, attentively, will experience growth quietly and steadily without the burden of stress or self-judgment. This is why the practicing mind is more than a technique. It is a lifestyle. Every task, every challenge, every simple action becomes an opportunity to train the mind. Writing one paragraph, cleaning one room, taking one step in a run, they all become meaningful. They all build focus, resilience, and calm. And over time, these small, intentional practices compound into extraordinary results. When practice becomes the goal rather than a means to an end, life changes. Work is no longer a source of tension. Effort is no longer heavy. Progress becomes natural, and the mind, once scattered and impatient, learns the quiet power of presence. The practicing mind does not rush the journey. It respects it. It finds peace in it. And in that respect, growth becomes inevitable. One moment at a time, one practice at a time, the mind transforms, not because of talent or luck, but because of the simple act of showing up fully, again and again. One of the most memorable and powerful examples in the practicing mind comes from the world of music, because music exposes the human relationship with patience better than almost anything else. Imagine someone learning to play an instrument for the first time. On day one, everything feels awkward. The fingers don't move the way they should. The sounds are rough, unpolished, sometimes even unpleasant. At this stage, the mind immediately jumps ahead. It imagines playing beautifully. It imagines performing confidently. And then it compares that future image to the current reality. That comparison is where frustration is born. Thomas Sterner explains that many people quit here, not because they are incapable, but because they are mentally demanding a level of mastery that can only come through time. They want to skip the awkward stage. They want the reward without respecting the process. And when reality doesn't cooperate, they label themselves as untalented or unmotivated. Now imagine two different students. The first student practices only when they feel inspired. They rush through exercises, focused on finishing songs rather than learning them. Every mistake irritates them. Every slow improvement feels like failure. Practice becomes emotional, tense, and inconsistent. The second student approaches practice differently. They sit down each day without expectations. They play slowly. They repeat the same notes patiently. They don't rush to sound impressive. They are present with each movement, each sound, each mistake. Over time, something unexpected happens. The second student improves steadily, almost quietly. Their confidence grows naturally. Their skills deepen. And most importantly, they enjoy the process. The first student, despite early promise, becomes frustrated and inconsistent, often quitting altogether. The book makes a clear and uncomfortable point. Talent does not create mastery. Patience does. This example goes far beyond music. It reflects how we approach almost everything in life. Careers, relationships, fitness, creativity. We want to perform well before we've allowed ourselves time to practice. We judge ourselves harshly for being beginners, forgetting that every expert once struggled with the basics. The practicing mind understands something most people ignore. Mistakes are not evidence of failure. They are part of learning. When mistakes are allowed, the mind stays open. When mistakes are punished mentally, the mind becomes tense and defensive. Sterner emphasizes that improvement accelerates when pressure is removed. When we stop forcing progress, the mind becomes more focused. The body relaxes. Learning becomes more efficient. This is why calm, consistent practice always outperforms rushed, emotional effort. Think about how this applies to your own life. Maybe you started a workout routine and quit because results didn't appear fast enough. Maybe you tried learning a new skill and stopped because you didn't feel good at it. In reality, nothing went wrong. You were simply experiencing the natural discomfort of practice. The practicing mind doesn't ask, "Am I good yet?" It asks, "Did I show up today?" That question changes everything. When the focus shifts from outcome to effort, practice becomes sustainable. You no longer rely on motivation, which comes and goes. You rely on presence, and presence is always available. This is why the music example is so powerful. Music doesn't respond well to force. You can't rush harmony. You can't demand mastery from repetition alone. It requires patience, attention, and acceptance of gradual improvement. Life works the same way. Mastery is not a dramatic moment. It is the quiet result of many ordinary practices done well. The practicing mind shows us that success is not about avoiding struggle. It's about changing how we relate to it. When struggle is accepted as part of practice, it loses its power to discourage us. And slowly, without force, without pressure, without rushing the process, growth happens. Not because you demanded it, but because you allowed it. This book did not begin as a grand idea or a plan to inspire millions. It began with frustration. Thomas M. Sterner was someone deeply interested in learning, improvement, and mastery. Like many of us, he wanted to get better at what he did. He practiced music, explored skills, and pushed himself forward. But no matter what he worked on, something felt wrong. He noticed that every time he sat down to practice, there was tension. Not physical tension, mental tension. His mind was never satisfied with where he was. If progress was slow, he felt irritated. If he made mistakes, he felt disappointed. If mastery seemed far away, he felt restless. From the outside, it looked like discipline. Inside, it felt like resistance. And one day he realized something uncomfortable, but honest. The problem wasn't the difficulty of the task. The problem was his relationship with the process. He was constantly judging his efforts. Every practice session was measured by how much closer it brought him to the goal. Every moment was treated as a test. That mindset made learning exhausting. So instead of quitting or pushing harder, he did something different. He became curious about his own frustration. He started observing how his mind behaved during practice, how it rushed ahead, how it demanded progress, how it refused to accept small, slow improvements. And then he experimented. He stopped focusing on outcomes. He stopped asking how long it would take. He stopped mentally arguing with the present moment. Instead, he focused only on doing the task in front of him, calmly, fully, without judgment. Something changed. Practice became lighter. Mistakes stopped feeling personal. Progress became steady instead of emotional. And for the first time, he experienced peace while improving. That experience was the seed of the practicing mind. This book is not theory. It is not motivation from a distance. It is a record of personal struggle turned into understanding. Sterner realized that most of our suffering doesn't come from failure. It comes from impatience, from resisting the natural pace of growth. He saw that when the mind stops fighting the process, learning accelerates naturally, not because of force, but because of focus. The book was written to share this discovery, to remind people that mastery is not something you conquer. It is something you grow into, and that growth can be peaceful. Sterner's story matters because it mirrors our own. We all want improvement without discomfort. We all want results without waiting. We all struggle with being beginners. This book exists because one person chose to stop fighting that struggle and instead understand it. In the modern world, one of the clearest real-life examples of the practicing mind comes from an unexpected place: Google. Google introduced a simple but radical idea. Employees were allowed to spend 20% of their work time on projects with no immediate pressure to succeed, no deadlines demanding results, no requirement that the idea must be profitable, no guarantee that anything useful would come from it. At first, this sounded risky, even wasteful. But something remarkable happened. Some of Google's most successful products were born during this unpressured time. Gmail, Google Maps, AdSense. These ideas didn't come from force. They came from freedom. This perfectly reflects the philosophy of the practicing mind. When the mind is constantly judged, it becomes defensive. When the mind is rushed, it becomes narrow. But when the mind is allowed to explore without fear of failure, creativity expands. Google understood something most individuals ignore in their own lives. Pressure kills innovation. Now think about how different this is from how we treat ourselves. We expect every effort to succeed, every hour to justify itself, every attempt to prove something. If a skill doesn't improve quickly, we abandon it. If results don't appear fast, we label the effort a failure. We rarely allow ourselves a practice space. The practicing mind says, growth needs room. Room to fail. Room to experiment. Room to be imperfect. That's exactly what Google created, and the lesson applies to everyday life. When you learn a new skill without obsessing over speed, you stay engaged longer. When you work on a project without constant self-judgment, your focus deepens. When you allow yourself to practice without pressure, progress becomes sustainable. The irony is this: when we stop forcing results, better results often appear. Google didn't demand innovation every minute. They trusted the process, and that trust produced extraordinary outcomes. This example proves that the principles in the practicing mind are not philosophical ideas meant only for personal growth. They work in real organizations, real careers, real systems. Whether you're building a company, learning a skill, or improving your life, the rule is the same. Remove unnecessary pressure. Respect the process. Allow time for practice. Because when the mind feels safe to explore, growth doesn't have to be forced. It happens naturally. Most people think the ideas in this book apply only to big goals, careers, businesses, or mastering difficult skills. But the truth is, the practicing mind is revealed most clearly in ordinary, everyday life. Think about how you start your mornings. You wake up, and before your feet touch the floor, your mind is already rushing ahead. Tasks, deadlines, messages, problems waiting to be solved. The day hasn't even begun, yet your mind is exhausted. Now think about studying or learning something new. You sit down to focus, but your mind keeps asking, how long will this take? Will this even be worth it? Why am I not better already? The work itself is not difficult. What drains you is the constant mental pressure to finish, succeed, and move on. Or consider starting something creative, a YouTube channel, a book, a business idea. At the beginning, there's excitement. Then comes comparison, views, likes, numbers, opinions. Instead of enjoying creation, you start chasing validation. And slowly, the joy disappears. This is where most people quit. Not because they lack talent, not because the idea was bad, but because they couldn't tolerate being in the middle. The practicing mind sees these situations differently. It understands that life is not lived at the finish line. It is lived in the middle, in the daily effort, the repetition, the showing up. Think about fitness. Most people don't quit because exercise doesn't work. They quit because they expect transformation before the body has time to adapt. They confuse impatience with failure. The same happens in relationships. We want understanding without communication, growth without discomfort, depth without time. But nothing meaningful works that way. The practicing mind accepts this truth calmly. It doesn't fight the pace of life. It works with it. One workout done with presence matters. One honest conversation matters. One focused hour of work matters. Not because it guarantees immediate results, but because it builds something deeper. Consistency, patience, trust in the process. This is the real struggle the book exposes. We don't struggle because life is hard. We struggle because we refuse to accept how growth actually happens. We want certainty. Life offers practice. And once you accept that, something shifts. You stop rushing moments away. You stop treating today as an obstacle to tomorrow. You start living inside your life instead of waiting for it to begin. That is the power of the practicing mind. This book doesn't tell you to work harder. It doesn't tell you to push until you break. It tells you to work more honestly, to stop pretending that speed is the same as progress, to stop believing that your worth depends on how fast you arrive. One moment at a time, one practice at a time, because life is not a race to be finished. It is a process to be lived. When you stop demanding perfection, you gain peace. When you stop rushing growth, you gain clarity. And when you learn to trust the process, you gain confidence, quietly, steadily, for real. You don't need to have everything figured out. You don't need to see the whole path. You only need to show up for the next step. If this way of thinking resonated with you, if it brought a sense of calm instead of pressure, then stay here. Subscribe and continue this journey with me. One idea, one practice, one moment at a time. Because real change doesn't come from hype, it comes from understanding. And trust, that is enough.